Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a look at a single but really powerful source. It's a report that focuses on one administrative compound in Guyana. And on the surface, this is a story about, flooded, trash-filled government center.
Mhm.
But when you dig in, it just exposes this startling intersection of, well, infrastructural collapse, a public health crisis, and this amazing symbol of local ingenuity that's also an indictment of neglect. So our mission for you, listener, is to go beyond the sort of surface level story here of overflowing water and garbage. We're going to dissect the conditions at the Parika Mora NDC compound, and we're going to try and extract what this, very local struggle reveals about governance, accountability, and how they find ways to be resilient when systems fail them.
Right. And to frame this, I think we should really look at the core issue here, which is basic maintenance. We tend to focus on big policy decisions, the things that grab headlines. But this report really forces us to confront that critical link between simple fundamental upkeep and the public's ability to just access government functions.
Yeah.
What happens when the very places designed to serve people become a health hazard themselves? I mean, that's a total failure, and it hits the most vulnerable people the hardest.
Okay, so let's ground ourselves. Where are we talking about, and what happens there? This is the Parika Mora NDC compound, and we should probably clarify what NDC means right away. It's a neighborhood democratic council. So think of it as the local administrative body.
A local government, essentially.
Exactly. And this compound is vital because it houses two key things: the Guyana Revenue Authority regional office, the GRA, and an agri-packing facility. So people have to go there for taxes, for business. This is not optional. But the main complaint, the one you hear over and over, is the flooding. Constant, predictable flooding.
And predictable is the word, right? The source is really clear on this. This isn't some freak storm.
Yeah.
It says the compound is flooded with every high tide or rainfall. So this isn't an emergency. It's just the normal state of things.
Yeah.
It's a chronic drainage failure.
Which creates this immediate barrier. Imagine you're trying to run a small business, maybe in agriculture.
Right.
You need to go to the GRA office. But you know that half the time you try, you're going to have to wade through knee-high stagnant water. That's not an inconvenience.
No, it becomes a deterrent. It actively discourages you from doing business, from participating in the formal economy.
Yeah.
It turns access to your government from a basic right into this huge logistical challenge.
And because that challenge is so predictable, an amazing and frankly pretty shocking solution has popped up. This chronic flooding has created its own little unofficial economy.
The flood trolley.
The flood trolley. And the image is just, it's so powerful. This isn't some government-run ferry service.
No, it's a private business.
It's a wooden cart, basically. And locals charge people a fee to physically wheel them through the floodwater to get to the government offices.
And, your first reaction might be, wow, that's resourceful. The source even calls it witty innovation in true Guyanese fashion. And you get it. People saw a problem and they found a way to solve it.
But that's where the story turns, right?
It has to. Because you have to ask, when does that kind of ingenuity stop being a feel-good story and start being just a glaring sign of government failure? The source is very clear on this. It says the flood trolley is fundamentally a sign of state failure.
That's the contradiction, isn't it? This clever little fix only exists because of this huge, chronic institutional failure.
Exactly. The line is drawn at who's paying. The government is supposed to provide safe, free access to its own services. When it fails to do that, it's basically outsourcing that function access itself to private citizens who charge a fee.
It's like a hidden tax.
It's a trolley tax. That's exactly what it is. If you want to interact with your government, first you have to pay this private toll just because the public infrastructure is broken. It makes the government's failure profitable for a few people.
And costly for everyone else. That reframing the trolley tax really gets to the heart of it. But the water, it's only half the story. And maybe not even the most dangerous half. Because the source describes a sanitation emergency. This compound isn't just flooded, it's reportedly filled with trash.
And that trash mixes with the stagnant water. So you've turned a drainage problem into an immediate public health crisis.
The conditions sound just intolerable. The report talks about the stench, flies, and floating waste in the floodwater.
It's a perfect breeding ground for disease. When you force your citizens, your taxpayers, to wade through contaminated water just to pay their taxes, you essentially weaponized neglect.
Weaponized neglect. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, you're creating a direct risk of cholera, dysentery, all kinds of infections. That compound becomes a potential source for a community-wide outbreak.
And the source is really good about detailing who this hits the hardest. It's not just some general problem for everyone. It targets specific groups.
Like who?
First, senior citizens. They are frequent visitors to the NDC, and they're the least able to navigate deep, filthy water. And of course, the most vulnerable to getting sick from it.
And then there were the people who have to live there. The report says the police officers' living quarters are in the compound.
I saw that. The hypocrisy is just staggering.
It is. We expect these officers to uphold the law, but the state makes them live in, I'm quoting here, contaminated water. They're living with floating garbage. What does that do to morale? To their health? It's just institutional disrespect.
And the trash problem seems to have its own internal dysfunctional logic. When the NDC gate is closed, people just dump their trash at the entrance to the GRA office instead.
So it's a zero-sum game, shuffling the filth from one government doorstep to another.
Right. And then you have the 10-day workers. These are temporary, low-wage staff, and it's their job to clean it all up.
They're just treating the symptom.
Exactly. They clean up the dump site, but the next high tide brings the water back, and the whole cycle starts over. They're basically being asked to scrub a floor that's perpetually flooding.
And that cycle points directly to the real breakdown: governance. These problems aren't a surprise. They're visible. They're chronic. They persist because there's a lack of will to fix the underlying drainage issue.
Which, of course, brings us to accountability. Residents are pointing fingers directly at local leadership. They feel like their complaints are just being ignored.
And that inaction is the second crisis. First, the infrastructure fails. Then, leadership fails to respond. That's when an engineering problem becomes an institutional one, when people feel like they're not being heard.
The source is specific here, too. It names the NDC chairman, a Mr. Jaideo Sookhoo, and the regional chairman of Region 3, Inshan Ayube.
Yeah.
And it adds a really interesting detail. It notes that Mr. Ayube is the uncle of the president, President Ali.
So we're talking about high-level political connections.
Right. And the allegation is that these officials have been dismissive and unresponsive. When you have those kinds of connections, the expectation for action is even higher, right? The failure to fix something so basic like a public health hazard feels even more significant.
It suggests the problem isn't a lack of power or access. It's a lack of priority. That dismissiveness you mentioned, it just fuels the whole crisis. Because if you can't get your local representatives to care about predictable flooding and human waste, why would you even bother trying to engage?
So the communication channels are just as clogged as the drains.
Seems that way. But the source doesn't just complain, it also points to solutions. It calls for immediate intervention.
From who?
Well, from the regional chairman, for one, but also from the Ministry of Local Government and, crucially, the NDIA.
The NDIA, that's the National Drainage and Irrigation Authority. Why them specifically?
Because this whole mess, from the trolley to the trash, it all starts with drainage.
Yeah.
It's an engineering problem at its core. The NDIA is the technical body with the expertise to actually fix the root cause, not just clean up the garbage.
So it's a call for real systemic intervention.
Yes. The core demand is for a, quote, safe, sanitary, and properly managed compound. It's a rejection of excuses, neglect, and recurring health hazards. It's really just a demand for the bare minimum of dignity and safety.
So let's bring this back to you, the listener. We started in this one compound in Guyana, but what we've really traced is a kind of roadmap of systemic failure. The key takeaway for me is just the sheer absurdity of it all, this coexistence of vital government services and these severe, predictable health hazards. And it's all symbolized by that flood trolley, witty, necessary, and just profoundly sad.
It really is a perfect case study. It connects government accountability directly to public health. A solvable drainage problem gets ignored, and it spirals out. It creates economic barriers, it disrespects public servants like the police, and it creates this ticking public health time bomb. It proves that policy means nothing if the place where you access it is literally rotten.
That's the big picture, isn't it? And if the community, just through sheer ingenuity, could invent the trolley to get around the problem.
It proves the problem can be solved. So we're left with this final thought for you to consider. If local ingenuity can solve the immediate problem of crossing the water, even with a private fee, what combination of political will and technical expertise from, say, the NDIA would it take to get rid of the flood and the filth for good? It's about shifting from temporary fixes to affirming a basic right, the right to safely access your government without paying a toll for the privilege. That disconnect is definitely something to mull over.